Love Paramba Kayombo. I'm the Executive Director for Africa for One Campaign. And just to tell you a little bit about the One Campaign is an advocacy and campaigning organization. It's a global organization founded initially to call for debt cancellation. And it has been in existence since 2010, and prior to being one, it was called DATA, and it was one of the organizations that organized the Make Poverty History campaign in 2005. And if you remember, that Make Poverty History campaign was directed at world leaders that met at Glen Eagles in Scotland. And they were calling for three things: more aid, more and better aid. They were calling for ODA to be 0.7 of every developed country's budget. And they were also calling for free trade and for debt cancellation. Because the reasoning behind that campaign was that aid alone will not lift developing countries out of poverty. It was true then, it's true today. But I think there's even a greater truth today, which is that developing countries themselves have a role to play in terms of coming out of poverty. No one is going to come and magnanimously lift you out of poverty. And as much as it relates to countries, it relates to individuals, that you have a role in setting a course for your life and being able to pursue it. But coming back to one of the key things that we deploy is campaigns that hold world leaders accountable for the promises that they make. And they usually make these promises at global replenishment conferences. Like when funds like the Global Fund, which funds HIV, AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria, those global multilateral bodies of funds, pots of fund, they are replenished every 5 years, and developed countries make commitments which they must then live up to.
How many of you here are familiar with the Boost Fellowship? So that I don't get too in-depth. Okay, all right. There's maybe, let's say, 30%. Okay, so the Boost Fellowship is actually a Zimbabwean organization. We were founded here in Zimbabwe in the year 2000. So this year we'll be celebrating our 18th year. Yay! 18 years. So we're becoming an adult. So we also need to start thinking of adult things to do. And One Campaign is one of our adult decisions for this year. We need to take it to the next step and to the next level. And we feel that because they have a global presence and an interest in youth and young people, it's a movement that we can associate ourselves with as the Boost Fellowship. But our main mandate is youth empowerment in Zimbabwe. We work with young people in Zimbabwe, aged 18 to 35, which is the Zimbabwean definition of a youth. So I would say the majority of people here are probably youth. And what we do with youth is we work with them at high school level, tertiary level, as well as out of school youth. We have several programs that we do with different partners. Our main support actually comes from local corporates, believe it or not. We do have some donor agencies and aid agencies we work with, but for the most part, our actual support comes from donor agencies. As part of our adulthood, we'd also like to see support coming from individuals.
The reason why I entered this competition is because it combines my passion for sustainable development and female empowerment. I thought if there's one thing that could change the life of girls all over the continent, it's gender-inclusive science, technology, and mathematics. My idea consists of catching them very young, at a very young age, for early childhood, developing soft and hard cognitive skills, problem solving, independent thinking, so that by the time they get to primary school and secondary school, they have a passion for science subjects. I think government should increase incentives for teachers who are involved in these subjects, as well as increase female role models in these areas, so that when they go to the girls themselves, they have something to relate to. So briefly, I would say that it should also improve the ongoing support and training for teachers in science, technology, and mathematics in rural areas and urban areas alike, so that by the time they get to school, girls have their needs, their emotional, psychological, and academic needs catered for. this would address gender disparities in education across the continent.
My name is Rumbitso Kunduza, just a slight correction on the surname Kunduza. And I'm a final year sociology student at the University of Zimbabwe. I'm also a spoken word artist, actress, singer and presenter. And I work with, so far I work with 2 women empowerment organizations, Women Excel and Precious Stones Foundation. And of course soon I'll be working with one organization. I am 21 years old, for those who are wondering.
Wow.
And I entered this competition because women empowerment is at the heart of my purpose here on earth. And also, who doesn't want to go to the African Union? But I have to admit that putting all the ideas in 500 words was quite difficult because I happen to be a lady of many words. But I'm grateful for the opportunity that one presented for us. And I often say that young people don't want a voice. Young people already have a voice. Young people need a platform for that voice to be heard. And I want to thank one organization for creating that opportunity. So the title of my essay is called the 3E Strategy, and that is empowerment through the 3 E's: engagement, education, and employment. And to just give you a context, and I'll try to be very quick, the rate of development of our African continents depend on the inclusive participation of both men and women. But sadly, for African nations, it seems like women and young people are continuously being excluded from mainstream development. So our main focus will be young women, and that's the girls. And the girl child's exclusion is a result of the gender stereotyping that results in her value and potential being underestimated. So how can we change that? How can we make girls count? And that's just one word: empowerment. The 3E strategy is the one that suggests how we can empower girls through engagement, education, and employment. And the first E, being engagement, means that we're engaging girls and her community. So engaging the girl and her community through what we call gender awareness programs. And these are programs designed to create like a paradigm shift in the perceptions, the negative perceptions and practices that have been making the girl child be excluded. So our job is to teach the girls why it is important for her participation, why it is important for the girl to be actively why it is important for the girl to actively participate in our nation, and to tell the communities why it's important for her to be actively participating in development. And of course, engagement includes that of the governments and the civil society organizations to implement and to create policies and to formulate a gender agenda for our girls. And lastly, the engagement being to involve a peer review of member states to ensure that this gender agenda is prime in their countries. Now the second E is education. And according to United Nations Convention of the Rights of the Child, they talk about, they advocate for free primary education. And the African Charter of the Rights of the Child also talk about free education for primary, but also to develop secondary education and make it eventually free. However, it seems that according to one statistics, 130 million girls are still being denied education, and 53 million are here in Africa. So I propose that governments increase girls' access to education. How? Through grants and scholarships that have a special quota for girls, especially those in the rural areas that are greatly affected by early child marriages, and many other communities that are affected by early child marriages. I propose that the governments also implement the affirmative action when it comes to enrollment in education institutions. Why? Because according to World Bank 2011, if we increase the enrollment of women in secondary education by just 1%, then we increase the annual per capita of the country by 0.3%. So imagine if we include a whole lot of women in our secondary schools. And my final E being employment. In 2015, 3.3 billion was made in the informal sector in our country, in Zimbabwe. And many countries are surviving on this informal sector. So to harness this, governments should introduce subsidized vocational training and entrepreneurship programs that have a special quota for girls, so that girls can also be included in projects that have to do with income generating, projects that are income generating. And I would like to acknowledge RBZ, the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe, for actually taking steps towards this. And then lastly, countries should introduce mentorship internship programs where the business community complements the efforts of the government, but the business community engages with the education institutions to come up with mentorship internship with a special quota for girls. Now this program will allow girls to gain relevant experience for skills, relevant experience and skills, but not just for them to be employable, but for them to then employ. So how can we make girls count in Africa? And that is just one word: empowerment. Empowerment through the 3E strategy: engagement, education, and employment.
For these and other stories, visit our website www.263chat.com. Follow us on Twitter @263chat and like our Facebook page 263chat.